What is up, my G? Hey guys, welcome to 2026. Happy New Year. I hope you have a really good one for all of you. And yeah, live, laugh, love. No, I'm just kidding, just have a good life. Anyway, this video today is going to be an interesting one because I'd like to talk about the predictions that I see the next major patch having. So we know there's going to be an update at the end of January, forecasted. Of course, Broken Arrow is not the best at sticking to deadlines, but you know, anyway. Yeah, we're going to look at what we think is going to get changed, buffed, reworked, and look at some of the units that are underused and should be used more often, and vice versa, the ones that are massively overused. Right, time to give a massive quick shout out to the legends supporting me on Patreon and YouTube members. You can join them, links in the description below, but really appreciate your support, couldn't do it without you. Okay, what better place to start looking at the stuff, the stats, than a bit of BA Armory. So yeah, great website, I do love it, as those who know. We look at the past update. The past update's mission or priority was to fix this gap of 54, 45 or 46 actually percent of the Russia-USA imbalance. What happened? They didn't fix it, they just made the gap bigger the opposite way around. There we go. The gap has been up and down, obviously widened here, peaking at 60-40. That is mental, so actually way worse than before. Bit of soothing back together as people got more or less used to it, and now it's getting wider again as we go into the new year. So, did the previous update achieve its objective of balancing the factions? No, absolutely not. Because, I mean, if we ideally want to see 50-50, don't we, in an RTS? We don't want bias, we don't want anything like that. I do also want to have a look and talk about the specializations, because another major part of the update, the mission was to see the mech infantry be used more. And again, yeah, I mean, relatively speaking, it is used a little bit more, but as a matter of fact, it is still the least used faction. Now, guards was... one of the objectives was to nerf the guards, essentially, and to have them be, well, to have Russia less dependent on them. And yeah, we've seen a massive fall in the guards, and in all fairness, they have achieved this. Whether you agree with the methods of achieving it or not, that is a different question, but they have achieved that objective where it's now from clearly the most popular to now the third most popular branch in the game. But when we look at what is really popular these days, we'll look at the top three. So Coastal, surprisingly, is very underused, as is Mech still, apparently. So I expect that these two are going to be the ones that they're going to try and buff. So Coastal and Mech are going to get buffed, I'm sure of it. Take my word for it. It's, you know, that people are simple. People, you know, want to be like, oh, look, here's the easy trend. Let's fix the easy trend, as opposed to look at the deeper overall issue. So I do expect that the... again, the Coastal and Mech are going to get some upgrades. And potentially buffs, upgrades in the terms of just cheaper stuff. Now again, the Guards are going back into fashion. The Sturmoviki are actually a really good infantry unit. The Guards are going back into fashion, but obviously the new leaders are by far the Motorized and VDV Brigade for Russia. I'm not expecting too much change. After all, the popularity has massively dropped from these sky-high numbers of 13% daily deployment rate, that's what these percentages are, to, well, 9%. And then, you know, your brackets, your absolute mean is way lower overall. Anyway, let's have a look at the comparison. Oh, wow. It's just literally a 180, isn't it? The comparison to America is pretty crazy. Now, I would actually say that this light blue line here is Special Forces. So it's crazy that Special Forces Armored, I think, was the most popular faction by far, the most popular deck combination, is now not so much the case. I still enjoy using it, it's still great fun. Maybe people are kind of tired of abusing Ghost Hawks and stuff like that, but, you know. Essentially what we see nowadays is that Armored is still popular. It's actually more popular, and I think more players are playing as America as a result of the buff, the previous update. And yeah, what else do we see? Marines have obviously massively increased their usage because of the Pack 2 moving across to the Marines, and them getting some pretty good units too. The Airborne's increased quite massively, actually, when you think about it. Slam Ram, stuff like that is going to be pretty useful too. I think the biggest winner from the update is Strikers. Strikers were never really... Oh, sorry, Strikers, the purple line. My mistake. Right, yeah. I was going to say I think Strikers are great anyway, but Strikers weren't really used that much at all, apart from HIMARS and other kind of spammy stuff like, well, yes, well, Strikers themselves, Bookers, etc. But they weren't that popular. Now, especially with the CRAM, we can see that you just see them almost in every game, which you can definitely see with the stats here, especially towards the end of the year, where they're just more increasingly popular. The pack 3 that they've gotten as well is also a great bit of kit, so we're not surprised there. So when we look at the charts put back together, we see that clearly the usage of Russia and Russian specializations is far, far lower. VDV is potentially the only one that still is, kind of close to the lowest used American faction, which is Special Forces. But overall, this is something that will probably aim to be fixed too. Again, interesting to see that the lowest Russian choice back then, which was the orange, which is the motorized infantry. Again, kind of surprising. Coastal is actually the brown, which is here. So yeah, that wasn't popular either, but that was on par with the most popular American one. Now the gap is significantly bigger. The lines barely intercept, again, apart from the most popular Russian and the least popular American. We'd like to see all the lines sort of, well, more or less in this sort of, ignore this outliner and this one. That's the sort of trend analysis that we'd like to see, because lots of different factions is interesting and it makes the game more replayable and just more enjoyable for all. Sorry about that voice crack. Jesus Christ. Yeah, so let's have a look at what particular units could potentially be causing this, and definitely the units that need to be buffed. Well, hello SU-57, I did get that out at the start for a reason. I think this is a very beautiful jet. It is cool, yeah, futuristic, and yeah, the stealth isn't as good as I think it should be. Maybe that's going to be one of the balances, the stealth, because it's unfair, in all fairness, that America gets so many stealth units and drones and helicopters and planes, and Russia only gets one. And even then, its stealth doesn't quite match up to the American standard. Now, I want to clarify, we do want asymmetry. Asymmetry and asymmetric warfare is definitely what we want. We don't want just a copy and paste of factions, but change it up a bit so nobody notices that, you're copying the homework that you've already done. So I don't think that, there should be perfect balance, but yeah, perhaps, it is a concept vehicle, of course. We haven't seen this used, well, in combat anyway. We don't know the stealth. We don't really know the actual value of stealth. It's all just an idea. But for the sake of balancing, maybe Russia deserves at least one futuristic stealth jet, I would argue. But anyway, aside from this, another bugbear of mine is actually a weapon. Now, the KH-38 rarely achieves its purpose of killing targets. You can select 2 of them and do basically, a Maverick run. How do I get rid of that? Why is that not disappearing? There we go, voila. So doing a Maverick run, but with the Russian KH-38 is really not effective. Obviously, when it comes to price, you're massively overpricing yourself. You're going to get shot down, and you can't expect to really make a profit with only 4 of these missiles that aren't as effective as the Mavericks. So I hope that this is actually going to be changed, same for the Maverick, for a top attack sort of missile. In which case, that becomes 4 missiles where you can quite easily, comfortably kill 4 targets, and this would be a really good improvement. So the KH-38, not necessarily the SU-57, but just the KH-38 and the Mavericks in general should be top attack. I mean, a plane is coming from the sky, hitting the top armor, not the front armor. I'm not an expert on these weapons, but, it's pretty safe to assume that a missile from a plane is going to hit the top. Moving on. Okay, what I think one of the biggest issues that Steel, Balalaika, or well, Slytherin, I suppose, are going to try to address is something that you probably won't expect. I don't think it's actually necessarily going to be in this most recent update. I hope so, but probably not. What I think it could come down to is the fact that, You know, we are all sick and tired of seeing Ooga Boogas, and I've selected these vehicles for a reason. They are the perfect Ooga Booga machines. It's the same kind of story with AMPVs and BMP3s, and to an extent the same story with super lightly armoured vehicles like the Typhoon and the Humvee. How those things can survive more than one shot from a tank, I have no idea. It kind of really annoys me a lot. But essentially what you have is these guys steam piling in, ATGMs cannot kill them quick enough, tanks can't kill them quick enough, and they pile into an objective, and obviously they just absolutely devastate your carefully built and planned defenses. Now, Ooga Boogering is quite frustrating, it's tedious, I don't think it's a very intelligent sort of strat to play. I think it should be a possibility, but I just don't think that it should be as easy, especially again when somebody's spent quite a lot of time building up a really solid defense network just to see it rushed past, smoked off, and entered the objective. It's not intelligent, strategic gameplay. It's boring, in a sense of the word. And also, it is low-key easy to counter. Well, I wouldn't say it's easy to counter, because if somebody does it badly, it is easy to counter. If somebody does it quite well, it's an incredibly tedious strategy. I think what needs to be fixed is when we look at these vehicles and we up-armor them, etc., give them a bit of extra firepower and HP, is the fact that tank shells and ATGMs just cannot really do much against these vehicles. They're too fast, so you are likely to lose line of sight. Obviously not so much an issue for the Javelin as for the Cornet, but even if you fire 2 Cornets at the ACV, for example, it's going to take the first hit, still be absolutely fine, so 15 HP, the Cornet does 11 or 12 damage, depending on the upgrade. So 1 HP, but otherwise still absolutely fine to drive. The next one will be automatically smoked off, and the vehicle will crack on as if nothing's happened. You are likely to reach your objective, you're likely to drop off all your Marines and storm the point. So there we go, those strategies do work. I think what would be really much better to see, oh, by the way, don't get me started on a tank. If a tank starts firing at these things, it could be 2 or 3 shots depending on certain factors. So yeah, and again, you just smoke off and drive past before you lose line of sight. I think a really essential thing that needs to be updated and buffed, I guess, for both factions is the damage done by tanks and ATGMs, but not in terms of the raw number of damage. So for example, this is obviously 12, but the actual modules. I would really love to see more module damage. So for example, this guy, not only just lose 90% of your HP and none of the infantry inside get damaged, by the way, which again I do think is a bit ridiculous, but also a lot of module damage, so especially to mobility. I mean, how the hell does a wheel stay on when a massive rocket flies into it? I don't know, but mobility is an absolute essential one. The other ones don't really matter for the BTR or the ACV kind of styled vehicles or the Strikers, or, you know, there's plenty of spammy BMP vehicles as well. Again, how the hell does this survive, you know, stay on 1 HP or 2 HP, whatever, and just fight as normal? You got to have a lot more critical module damage, in my opinion. So that is something I'd really like to see for both factions. I think the main biggest issue for Russia these days is the fact that AA just refuses to hit. And that is super annoying when America is not so much dependent on air spam, but is heavily reliant on it, or it is one of the best features of America, the air power, and so you're doing the right thing by using it. You know, if you've got a strength, use and abuse your strength. Unfortunately, though, Russia's weakness is air defense, really. It's pretty pathetic, and even if you have a good network, I had like 5 bits of air, I had 2 of these bad boys, 1 S-350 and 2 Pantsers, and I couldn't shoot down a single bloody plane. Yeah, very frustrating, very broken mechanic, and the mechanic that I'm talking about here is also overkill. By the way, in that situation, I was actually manually clicking to fire, and even still, I just could not shoot stuff down. It was really incredibly frustrating. So, radar lock, semi-active missile lock, definitely is something that needs to be addressed. but also I think it is quite important that the overkill mechanic gets seen to as soon as possible, because there's nothing more frustrating than actually having a really good, amazing air defense network that is abused by, you know, the mechanic of, well, your air defense actually refusing to shoot at a perfectly valid target. Again, that is something that can be for both factions. The Pack 2 suffers with this a little bit, but nowhere near as much as the S-300 series of Russian anti-aircraft vehicles. Similarly with Stingers, you know, Verbers trying to shoot at helicopters. It's just not ideal. They shouldn't survive as long as they do. Okay, let's talk about everyone's favorite subject, and that is Russian armor. In particular, Russian Barbaris. There we go, let's nerf it. That is a meme. That is the meme you always see whenever there's any live stream or something. Somebody is guaranteed to comment Nerf Barbaris. And let's be honest, that is because this bad boy costs as much as a SEP V2 fully upgraded. That is insane. That is ridiculous. In certain situations, this thing is an absolute monster. However, you do need more than 2 of them for it to be truly amazingly effective. Now, me and Dan tried to use these unicorn amazing super powerful units just to see if it's still a viable strategy. We got down tiered massively, meaning the game in theory should have been a lot easier, but we still struggled. There's nothing you can do about the longbow missiles, and obviously the abundance of javelins absolutely ripping these things apart. So what is the solution to that? I don't really know. Apart from price decrease, so I reverse what they did. Not much is to be said about that. I tried to use it in this configuration as well, by the way, just to keep it a bit cheap, but it's really, really difficult to play. Russian tanks, Russian armor in general has suffered massively, to the point where, obviously, because javelins are top attack, no matter what tank you have, no matter how good it is, the top armor is always really thin, meaning that all the javelins are going to rip your tanks apart basically equally. So there's hardly any point using expensive Russian armor anymore. Another thing I've noticed is ECM basically doesn't work anywhere near as well. It used to be the case that the first Hellfire or Javelin fired would be guaranteed to miss. When you have 30% ECM, the first missile was almost guaranteed to miss. Now this only works if the squad is panicked or some certain conditions, a bit of line of sight or whatever, but essentially it doesn't really work. Similarly, the smoke struggles to actually effectively block missiles, which is incredibly frustrating. What I found, the only way I found to make smoke actually work is to smoke out and then reverse your vehicle. That's the only way that the hitbox of the smoke, if you will, the sphere of the actual, so you know the model, like the graphics and the actual way the game registered the model are not the same. So the actual hitbox of the smoke is really tiny, and if a tiny bit of your tank, so for example, you know, imagine a sphere of smoke around your tank, and say the sphere ends here, where your tank slightly pokes out, the Hellfire will hit it. But smoke is an issue that works both ways, because you can actually shoot the things like the Derivace through the smoke into helicopters, so you're perfectly protected in your Derivace, but your cannon is still going to be firing. A ridiculous mechanic that is so abusable, it's basically almost cheating, apart from it is a perfectly, it's how the game works, so there's not much you can do about that. So yeah, things like that do need to be fixed. I would like to see ECM work a bit better again. It is hard because I know a javelin should be hitting reliably, but things like jamming do exist in real life, and whilst I'm not convinced that these little infrared glow things, I'm going to call them, do the work perfectly, I know that the technology should exist. Perhaps also, now this is going to be a crazy idea, we've seen this in Ukraine, and yep, whilst Ukraine is sort of outside of the 2020 design period of the game, it's not hard to put a cage on top of the tank. So like we see in the news, unfortunately, in the current conflicts that I really hope stop, that'd be a great Christmas present from Vladimir and Zelensky, wouldn't it? To just stop all wars, that would be lovely. But let's be realistic, probably not going to happen. But what we could see is the top cage armor be introduced just to help you deal with the abundance of javelins and things like that. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the prevalence of Arty and cruise missile spam. I think this is basically, they tried to do a price increase, but ultimately not much has really changed. People still do love to spam out the coalition. People love the Iron Thunders, and people love cruise missiles, whether it's from a plane or from, from the Iskander, whatever. I still see a lot of that in the game. It's really frustrating, and to be honest, I hate it. I'm really not an Arty player. I'm really bad at microing my Arty as well, to be honest. I just forget about it. I don't really enjoy using it at all. But unfortunately, it has to be a part of the game. But the biggest issue I find is that when you sacrifice an expensive plane, or you spend a lot of resources like snipers and a lot of time finding the arty in the back line, you laze it, you kill it. The problem is within 5 minutes they're gonna quite easily get replacements out. And when you're talking about Arty potentially being 160 points, or if you upgraded 225, it's really not that much, and it can be really effective. Again, if you laze and if you get, if you just harass the enemy constantly with these guys, it's Brutuses are a perfect example of this, by the way. Where's the Brutus? Here she is. Like for 110 points, you can spam these guys out, no problem. You're going to keep spamming them out, keep firing. To be honest, you can fire 18 shells RTB and get a new set out before the enemies even had time to realize. So the cooldown and the price, I think, is too low. It is massively abused. It is, again, a bit of a brain-dead tactic. It, of course, requires a lot of micro, but just sitting there and shelling, I think, is so unbelievably boring. It is a legitimate part of war, of course. I do understand that aspect of it, but it's boring, and I want to see less of it. I mean, the HIMARS reloads incredibly quickly, and the aim time of its, there we go, 10 to 12 seconds. So MLRS, which, by the way, should probably be, you just point and shoot with MLRS, so it should be quicker, whereas a ballistic missile fires quicker, so you can get these bad boys non-stop coming out of this thing. And it's really boring. It's really, really boring. It's so spammy. Yeah. Most spam tactics, I hope, get nerfed. I really do hope that, in general, spam tactics are going to get nerfed, and intelligent gameplay should be rewarded and buffed, essentially. So, build-up of troops, tactical decisions, choosing which objectives you're going to take, etc, 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 as opposed to just a brain-dead tactic of, I'm going to spam ACVs full of Marines, put them into objective, take it, retreat, or yeah, whatever. The same with the BTRs, by the way. Both sides are prone to this sort of behavior. It really does frustrate me. A tank should be able to change the tide of battle. However, unfortunately, with the state of the game, with how expensive and yet how easy to kill they are, it's really not worth bringing out a super expensive vehicle like this one. So when we quickly refer to the stats again, I do want to say a couple of things. I absolutely have no issue with javelins working the way they do. It's a great weapon, it should work great. Same with the Hellfire. The problem is not with the fact that America is doing well. Again, absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. There's no bias there. I really like the fact that America works as intended. Having said that, obviously I've still won and lost quite a few games as America. So it's not the worst thing in the world. You just do have to really adapt your strategy and basically remove your dependence on heavy armor completely. I think the biggest issue that we need to look at is not the VDV or the Moto. It's going to be the coastal and mechanized troops, which is what I'm going to do right now. So come on, let's analyze the coastal units. Now the biggest change from the previous update was the Tu-22 and its missiles working as they should, so working properly. But by making them work properly, they became harder to intercept, so Russia players have been less dependent on it. Fantastic. I hate cruise missile spam, so I'm very happy with that. However, when you look at the rest of the deck, it's actually really good. I don't understand it at all why coastal troops are often overlooked. I think the VMF is fantastic, the Chorny are brilliant, this Razvedka, this, and the SPG-9 is actually really good when you know how to use it. Basically just use it in long-range supporting role, and it's great. Yeah, okay, Iskander players, I hate you, but whatever. The Bereg itself is actually a really good unit. The BMP-3, not as good as the other BMP-3, but still pretty good. This is good. This Tor is very good, especially because it can survive a hit from Seed, which is really good. So I know a large part of that is people overlooking this faction, as opposed to the units of this specialization being inherently bad themselves. This is the tank, the only tank that the Coastal get. And again, I actually have no issues with it. You should never use it in this really expensive, over-the-top configuration. It actually works really well like this. Super dirt cheap. That's a lot of firepower. This is better than a Booker's. And when you're facing heavier tanks like the American ones, you still have your 16 HP. Again, kinetic shells only do 6 damage, so yeah, that's really not a lot. And when you have 2 smokes and a lot of these tanks, you really don't struggle to play against American armor whatsoever. The gun is still very sufficient to do the job at keeping basic vehicles at bay. Yeah, okay, SEP V3 does have thicker skin, but you can still actually punch through it. The S350 is the best Russian AA in the game because of terminal guidance. Now, it is a bit expensive when you upgrade it to be more effective, but it does fire 2 missiles per target. Again, this isn't really a coastal issue, this is more of a game issue with anti-air missiles just not quite hitting as they should. So that really is something that I'm hoping will be fixed in the end of January update that is promised to us. But otherwise, Coastal is a really, well, clearly underrated and underused deck. The best deck combination, I think, I'll just quickly show you this one, is this heavy deck that I've got, which just works. I win a lot when I use this combination. It is a great deck. Bear that in mind. So yeah, I really don't understand what the problem with Coastal is and why it's so damn unpopular. By the way, this is the cheapest plane you can have for just a permanent bit of recon. So for permanent 1200 range, on your back line for spotting sentinels, this is the cheapest plane in the game. The mechanized though. Now I do understand and I do have a few issues with this one. I think the biggest issue is the fact that most of these guys are 7 squads and they've put the engineer Sturmoviki in here, just to, again, decrease the dependence of the guards. But unfortunately, they've also killed off a man who was actually pretty damn useful to the squad. The extra man did make this squad a lot more beefy than it is. So for 75 points, it's still a capable team, especially in this configuration where you're trying to fire more long-range firmer barracks as opposed to storming buildings. But when you try to storm buildings with these guys, the one man really makes a huge difference and the squad is no longer as good. Now, I get they've made it 7 just to fit it into the back of these vehicles. Most of these are 7-man seating capacity vehicles, but I'm not sure it was the right thing to do. Again, the ante is actually really good, but only if it starts to hit. So even if they just fix Russia's AA, that could potentially be enough, honestly. Just fixing Russia's AA and the overkill mechanic and the smoke, that could in itself be a big enough fix to actually stop America's huge advantage of air superiority. Things like, let's look at the infantry, because this is not the best infantry tab, but even these guys for 70 points, double RPGs, they're really good. It's very underused. I think the price is fair. This one, maybe make it cheaper, and similarly with these guys, for 80 points, 1 pathetic Igler and the machine gun is probably a bit too much. With 6 armor, I should add, with 6 armor especially. Yeah, the 6 armor for these guys, again, maybe this squad is a little bit overpriced, but not dramatically, you know. It doesn't, a 5-point difference would probably actually be sufficient. Even this Razvedka team for 50 points is absolutely fine. Machine guns. Yeah, machine guns is also something that really is a bug of mine. Machine guns are super deadly. They're more deadly than accurate rifle fire. Well, in some situations, of course, this is different, but machine guns should be a lot more lethal than they are in the game. So you can have a lot of suppression. 3 machine guns is a lot of firepower. 250 cal machine guns is a huge amount of firepower. You're going to absolutely keep the heads down of any enemy in the line of sight. But unfortunately, it's just far too easy for squads to basically not take any damage and move on. Essentially rendering these guys pretty damn ineffective, in all honesty. So yeah, machine guns are also something that does need a bit of a rework to actually be machine gunny, to actually, you know, have some output. But the Tunguska is fantastic. I mean, it is expensive when you put it in the Panzer loadout, but for 175 points, this is still a fantastic, really fantastic bit of shore ride. So yeah, again, I'm not really sure where the problem lies. I don't think it's in the individual unit pricing. Perhaps it is the mechanics overall. And again, the AA, just that being fixed on its own is probably going to be enough. By the way, this is a great vehicle, quite underused. But the mechanized are underused in general. Russia is obviously underused in general. When we look at stuff like the other Russian units that are still really popular but don't particularly do as well, we've got things like the Cornet. Other Russian squads are still pretty good. You know, that, I love this, I love this. It's just basically the armor that is far too easy to kill. And we've already talked about it, that an easy solution is just to put a cage on top of these vehicles, literally, as we've seen happen in real life. We've got futuristic units like the Armata, Comanche, and lots of other stuff. So it doesn't make, it's not a big stretch to just put a cage over existing units, because it would really obviously help out with the Javelin and the top attack missile spam that America does profit quite well of. In terms of other vehicles in general, like the GRU does actually abuse a little bit of its Smirch and Tornado. I would like to see this reduced, like I would with all supporting playstyles. It is a bit dependent on that. When we look on the American side, there is a lot of great units in here. The Marines are used and abused quite a lot. I'm actually quite surprised at how effective they are, given that they have no machine gun. And again, this goes back to the whole point about machine guns just really not being that effective anymore. In terms of helicopters, I think they're finally balanced now between Russia and America. I actually really don't have any issues with helicopters whatsoever. In terms of armor, I think American tanks are priced really well. I don't see an issue here whatsoever. The Marine tanks with their 30% ECM actually still work pretty damn well. Again, we are susceptible to a bit of the, abuse of Arty. In terms of airstrikes, again, I have absolutely nothing with the Strike Eagle. It's a great vehicle and it should remain great. I just think it should be a bit more realistic to shoot it down, especially if you have a really good AA net that has not been dealt with the enemy. But whilst we're on the subject of planes, we've got to talk about cargo planes. Essentially, they're never ever used. Not since past they're not used ever since, basically, once you get past 500 elo, people stop paradropping. And I hate that. Make paradrops great again, I say. And I think there's basically two ways of doing it. If you looked at my map video, that would be actually quite a good one for you to watch if you're interested in more of these discussion types videos where we look at every single map in the game. And so one option is make the map wider and give it more depth, so people have to make strategic positions whether to go for certain sides of the maps or not. Again, this allows for more paradrops because units are a bit more spread out. So that is option A. The other option is to either dramatically reduce the price, which I think would be a bit stupid. I don't think that's going to happen. Another option is to increase ECM, flares, and health, which is ridiculous. That's not going to happen. But the other option is something else that I've seen written in the forums quite a lot. To increase survivability, so when a car gets exploded, that's something I'll talk about in a second. When a truck gets exploded, all the infantry just get out like nothing happened and they're good to fight. Okay, they might lose a tiny bit of HP, but they're still mostly absolutely fine, which is crazy. When a plane gets shot down, even though obviously it's still flying for a good 10 seconds, nobody jumps out the plane. When a plane is going down, we saw this in D-Day, people will try their hardest to get out the plane. So at least a few more squads should make it out alive of the burning plane. That is my argument, and I think that would be really great to see if the devs thought about it. I'd love to see more paradrops in general. These are super underused. The only one that's really used is Special Forces. Here we go. This one, because he's got 20% ECM, he usually gets away with dropping most of his infantry before he gets shot down. Right. yeah, otherwise, apart from that, I think in terms of units specifically themselves, I think mostly the balance is okay. We just need the mechanics to actually, the smoke, the ECM, and the sort of those kinds of, and the AA hitting mechanics actually working. The other thing we got to talk about is, so we've already mentioned Ooga Boogas, but vehicles getting hit by missiles. And obviously all the guys jumping out like nothing's happened. I think squads jumping out of a destroyed vehicle should at least have a 50% damage, so half the squad wipes out, as is quite realistic, as you can imagine. A tightly packed, dense vehicle with all the squaddies in the back, getting hit by a massive missile, which, by the way, should still do, prevent Ooga Booga rushes with crippling the vehicles, etc. Should do 50% damage to the squads inside, I would argue. Potentially, every hit to the vehicle should do some damage to the guys on the inside. So, if a vehicle is on 1 HP, the guys inside should take damage for sure. So there we go, that's definitely an argument to be made for that. I don't really like the idea of Kinder Egg. So a Kinder Egg is, if you don't know, is when a vehicle, such as the Hemmet or like the Russian Skrzhet, where is it? This one, the Srakushka. So it can fit 3 squads, as can the Hemmet. It is when this vehicle gets destroyed, blown up, it explodes into 1,000 pieces. The 3 squads just hop out and fight as if nothing's happened. That is absolutely mental. I think similarly with, like we talked about with the planes getting shot down and not a single squad surviving, I think this is gonna have to be changed for helicopters too. So if a helicopter gets shot down at high altitude, I think, yeah, all the infantry should die. Or maybe one guy survives, literally one straggler. It is a bit of a tax, but with one guy surviving, because, yeah, it's an ineffective squad, but you still have, you still pay the upkeep for them. So maybe at low altitude, or if the helicopter was about to land anyway, then squads should take more damage than getting out of vehicles. But there should be a bit more survivability of helicopters, because they don't always crash in a big ball of flames. Sometimes they do have soft landings after being hit. So there we go. That's also something else that could be a really good balance, and basically just a really good feature for the game that would really point it in the right direction. So you might have seen in the Ghostovich's video, which, yeah, it's in Russian. I wouldn't recommend watching it if you don't speak Russian. But essentially, they talk about all of these features. They've made a good little Reddit summary of it, so that's what we're going to discuss now as well. So, the original stream was here by Ghostovich, a Russian YouTuber, obviously a massive channel, especially compared to mine. Anyway, it's Seryoga, the original guy, and Nikita, one of the head devs for STB. Anyway, here's the English summary. So, I'll put this link in the description. Essentially, it's a translated, summarized version of everything they talk about for 2 hours, 24 minutes. A very, very long time. So, yeah, yeah, it is definitely in a poor technical state, and it's really good to see that the actual STB guys understand this. I don't think Slytherin really is great at the marketing side of things, or about actually talking about their game. I will hopefully have an interview with Seryoga, again, this guy, myself. I'd look forward to that. Whether it's in Russian or English, we will see, but I am fluent in both. Anyway, right. The thing that, yeah, the team admits that the game is in a poor technical state is great. Faction balance is not just problematic, but in a state of crisis. And I think the entire balance philosophy is being reworked. Again, I'm not sure how much more actual, different stuff they need. Like we talked about in the units, just a simple fix like the previous simple fix that really threw the balance off was fixing terminal guidance. They fixed that, great, and then balance, got thrown out the window. So if you did a simple balance like making AA for Russia work and hit hard, that would be potentially enough in itself. I'm not sure why the entire philosophy is being reworked. I do think they would have been better at sticking to, cheap Russian units, but lots of them, and expensive but more elite American units, with obviously always exceptions to the rule. But yeah, maybe that's the sort of line they're going to narrowly focus down on. The public test build, I think that's expected February or March. I think that's to give themselves a buffer. We hopefully will see a big update at the end of January. Yeah, there's the cold launch. So yeah, we'll see what the actual solution is going to be. I don't think there's too much more interesting stuff in terms of, you know, predictions for the future. The only thing is that multiple variations of other existing maps are planned along with new maps, which is really cool and great to see. Again, even just expanding the amount of capture points and different positions of those capture points is going to be something that really, you know, tests your brain and actual strategy, as opposed to, just same old tactics that you're pretty used to. I think the only thing that's kind of surprising is the fact that naval forces are confirmed. Quite a long time ago, I did see a thing in 2020, potentially 2021, which said that there definitely will be no navy. So we'll see how that actually turns out to be. But obviously there are naval units in game already, and they'll, I guess, work as more support arty kind of cruise missile spammy sorts of units, which I'm not really looking forward to. I don't think it's necessary, but here we are. Maybe you'll actually get, well, who knows, maybe you'll get aircraft carriers. Friendly fire will remain. Betrayals happen in real wars as well. No, I think not betrayals, but accidents happen in real wars as well, and I think it's fair to say that, you know, sometimes it's just worth it to do an airstrike on your own position, but I'm glad they're on this page. Some of you may die, but that is a sacrifice I'm willing to make. But that's it. I think that's it from me. So that's the things that we're expecting to see in the January update. I hope to see you all there. I hope there's still going to be interest in the game, although I've noticed it dying, especially on my channel, which I hope it's not a me issue. Hope you still enjoy my videos. But yeah, Sturmový Key, 55 points. Great squad for 55 points especially. Lots of success there. Cool. I hope you enjoyed watching this one. Thanks so much for your time. Happy New Year once again, and hope you subscribe, like, and comment your thoughts on the video. Cheers, bye-bye.